there, Synergizers, and welcome back to another episode of the Creating Synergy podcast. My name is Daniel Franco, and today we have a very highly regarded and respected individual on the show, Head of Health at ANZ Bank, Mr. Brendan Rinaldi. Brendan is an executive leader at the ANZ, managing the health sector portfolio, and is focused on creating high-quality leaders, managing their well-being, which he believes leads ultimately to high-performing cultures. Brendan is a mentor to many, a father, and grew up on a farm, which is still in operation today, and something he's very, very passionate about. With a background in accounting and restructuring, banking and finance, Brendan previously worked for PwC and Mentha before joining the ANZ. He now leads large national and state teams and has done over the past 8 years, with a real focus on creating a world-class culture with a values-based approach. Brendan is always keen to develop and expand on leadership skills and bringing the best out in others, particularly with a passion around well-being and performance. And he's put a lot of time and effort into his own leadership and development in this area. He is a highly sought-after speaker and asked to discuss the great well-being initiatives that he and the team have implemented at the ANZ Bank. On top of this, Brendan was one of the masterminds behind the very well-regarded ANZ Community Ball, which raises hundreds of thousands of dollars each year for charity. In this episode, Brendan and I talk about his journey from early in his career and sporting days to becoming one of the youngest executive leaders of the ANZ. We also deep dive into his learnings about building a team from scratch, diversity and inclusion, his background in sport and how it helped him succeed as a leader, the importance of connecting with clear and constant communication, how he managed an Australian-wide team from the distance, the benefits and return on investment when focusing on the well-being of the team, his non-formal approach to his personal development, life after the pandemic, risk of burnout, and why it is important to focus on the well-being element, his involvement in the ANZ Community Ball, and we both love reading a lot. So we spoke a lot about some amazing book recommendations. I know you're absolutely going to love this episode. And if you would like to learn more about some of the other amazing leaders that we've had on the Creating Synergy podcast, then be sure to jump on our website at synergyiq.com.au or check us out at the Creating Synergy podcast on all the podcast outlets. Cheers. So welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. My name is Daniel Franco. Today we have the great man, Brendan Rinaldi. Thank you for coming on the show, Brendan.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. It's great to be here.
So, Brendan, you are touted as one of the youngest executives in the ANZ banking history to, or one of the youngest people to have made an executive role within ANZ in the history of the ANZ Bank. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to where you came from your football to transitioning into the corporate life to becoming a consultant to where you find yourself today?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure in history, but I was
recent years.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite young, obviously, going into a leadership journey with ANZ, and I guess my background is accounting. I started at PwC and worked in sort of audit and tax for a while. Had got my CA ticket, and then went overseas and travelled, as all young people do, and got back, and it was the middle of the GFC, and I didn't want to work in audit anymore. It was quite dry. So I spoke to the audit partner who originally hired me, and I said, I want to try something different. He said, well, corporate recovery are hiring. So I did about 12 to 18 months in corporate recovery with PwC, and I was at an event, and I know you're big on networking, so I was at a networking event, and I ran into a couple of guys who were ex-Anderson and were working at Mentha, and my sister actually started at Anderson and before she went to Ernst & Young. And I was having a great time with those guys, and they said, "Oh, what are you working for PwC for? You need to come and work for us." So I went and worked. Well, a couple of coffees later, went and worked for Mentha, and did that for 4 years, and then ANZ, or the banks were our biggest clients back then, and because you'd typically be appointed as a receiver of a company, and I always. When I was at PwC, I wanted to make partner. When I was at Mentha, I thought I want to make partner. And I thought the best way of getting there would be to put yourself in the client's shoes. So as part of my development, spoke to the leaders there and said, I'd like a secondment at one of the banks. And fortunately, through another connection at ANZ, and I guess building that over time, they called one day and said, could I go on secondment there? And it was a 12-month secondment, which turned into a full-time role. And I really enjoyed it. So I guess my step into leadership there was, I'd only been in the role for about 12 months, and was actually just coming up to the birth of our first child. And it was one of those things where I think I actually worked Good Friday at Easter just to get everything clear the decks, and said to my wife, I've got everything under control. I don't need to do anything for the next couple of weeks. Everything's under control. So I can really just, embrace the birth of our first child. Anyway, so Hugo was born, and then the following morning I got a phone call from the boss saying, can you come in for breakfast on Monday? I want to chat to you about something.
So the boss from ANZ?
At ANZ. Oh, the guy I was ultimately reporting to. We'd sort of had a restructure, so we had a new boss, and he was just changing the decks a little bit. And so I went for breakfast with him, and he just said, talk me through your strategy around agri in particular, which was kind of the area that I was working in, and talked him through that strategy. And he said, I want to set up a dedicated division. This is in the risk area, and I want you to run it. And I said, I've only been at the bank 12 months. I don't even have any direct reports. Like, are you sure you want me to run a team? Like, are you sure I'm qualified for this? And he said, yeah, we back you. We think you've got what it takes, and we'll make sure we've got the right support around you to make sure you're successful, which was, when I look back on it, it's so good to have someone like that put so much faith in you. Absolutely. And so I had to build a team of 22 nationally. It was in the distressed area. So we're talking customers that are at risk of default. And particularly in the farming side, it's very stressful, obviously, for people. So there was a lot of empathy and compassion required. And for me, it was less about numbers. I'd obviously been an accountant, worked in banking. And so I turned to sort of self-study in psychology, and because it was all about just, helping people through those times and helping them get out the other side. And I think just leaning on my sporting career, similar to yourself, I played a lot of, football growing up at not at AFL level, but at reasonable levels, at the next level down, and was always sort of part of leadership teams. So sort of lent on that sort of team approach, and I guess everything you learn in that environment. And a lot of the teams I was part of were quite successful. So I think you sort of gather that recipe for success is a team that's really cohesive, plays well together as a team, and all as one, and not so much a team of great individuals. I've been part of one of those teams before and should have won the grand final, but didn't even make the prelim final just because
team of champions instead of a champion team.
Exactly, and I really rate the work sort of Shauna Corr's done on that around realising your big potential, and I think Google's done some studies on that too to show that it's not necessarily the survival of the fittest anymore. It's the survival of best fit, because it's the how you best fit into a team to make that team perform. So I guess a lot of that was sort of my approach to leadership, and I guess that's how I got into leadership. And since then I've moved on to, this is my fourth leadership role. So I moved to Adelaide in 2017, which was the big leadership role. So that was becoming state general manager of SA and NT, which I did for 3 years. And then sort of into that 3 years, I also took on WA as well. So had SA, NT and WA. And more recently, I've just been appointed, about 5 months ago, to the head of health for our corporate institutional business. So that's really working with our private hospitals, our large aged care providers, retirement living and that sort of thing. So
all the community stuff that you love.
All the community stuff, that's right.
There's a lot in that journey. Obviously, sport, we'll touch on sport. You committed the cardinal sin of leaving the consulting firm that you're working for and for the client that you're working for. How did that go down in its first moments? Did you discuss that with your leaders at the time?
Yeah, it was a tough decision. I really enjoyed working with Quartermantha. The culture there was sensational. Obviously had a great relationship with the owners of the business, Mark Quarter and Mark Mentha, and going from a big organisation like PwC, where you don't really have that sort of connection with an owner. Obviously, it's a big partnership practice, but it was just great to be able to have that ability to talk to them one-on-one, and decisions were made really quickly because they own the business, so they could make decisions very swiftly. So look, it was an open and honest conversation. I went back to both of them and probably the leading Melbourne partner, a guy called Craig Shepherd at the time, and just said, look, ANZ's made me a really good offer, and I really enjoy what I'm doing there. And the insolvency business which is where I was working most of my time at Quartermenta, was pretty quiet at that time in 2013. So yeah, it was, I had their blessing, and Quartermenta is one of those companies that sort of still supports their people once you're gone. I think that's, I've still got incredible support from those guys. Mark Mentor's a great mentor, and he's actually the godfather of my daughter and things like that. So I've still got the benefit of leaning on them, but their approach is that once someone's worked for Quartermenta, they've always got the Quartermenta brand that they carry with them. So they really want to support people even once they're gone. Absolutely. So it's a great culture.
Well, it works in roundabouts, right? If you ever need help, you give them a call.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's a good attitude to have.
And look, even if customers find themselves in trouble, it's good to be able to help them talk to someone too. So I know someone in this space who's worked in corporate turnaround for a long time. It might be just worth a discussion, and things can always come out of that. So yeah.
How did you find the working to the well? Basically, let's start back where you jumped into the ANZ role, and creating a team from scratch. First real major leadership role, really large learning curve.
Yeah.
What were some of the practices that you put in place early, or learnings that you sort of sought after early?
I think so when I say I built a team, I guess I was given around 10 or 12 incumbents from the bank, and then had to recruit the rest.
Yep.
It's a bit of a help and a hindrance. You've got this amazing ability to build your own team, because on the other hand, you can walk into a team that's already built, and you have to inherit that, and you have to inherit that culture, and then try and change it, whether it be good or bad, and change things. When you build it from scratch, you can actually target the people you want. So we had quite I had quite an aggressive strategy around diversity. I thought I've always been a big believer in diversity of all parts, not just gender, but background and thought, the cognitive diversity that you need in a team. So together with my 2IC at the time, we sort of put our heads together and went, all right, who are some of the best bankers we can target to get into our team? Who are some of the best consultants or insolvency practitioners in the market externally that we can go and target, and who are some of the better lawyers that we can go and target, so we can actually bring this team together with all these different skills that can all leverage off each other. Because I think when you hire people, you've kind of got to identify 3 or 4 competencies, and they've kind of got to tick off at least 3 of those 4. Like sometimes there's too big a gap for people to come up to speed in a role, but for the accountants and the lawyers coming in, their big gap. So approach to customers would be right. Their knowledge of process and insolvency or accounting would be really high. Where they'd be lacking is banking. So if you had a good team of bankers around them, you would get them up to speed. For the bankers, if they were lacking around broader knowledge around how the whole process works from a legal perspective, then they've got lawyers around them to talk to as well. So that diversity just drove a really strong, cohesive team from the start. And, I've got my favourite photo is the day I actually left that team. And the gender split was around 50-50. It was probably more in favour of women, which, running an agribusiness, and we started, I think, with 20% women. And my boss said, good luck trying to attract women into an agribusiness team. Well, we soon proved him wrong, but I think we had people of all different backgrounds in terms of, multiculturally, like where they came from in terms of legal profession or accounting profession. In terms of age group, we had really young people in the team, and we had some people that had been very progressed in their careers. So I think just creating that really diverse group, and we were just known, I guess we were very close. And I think, creating that team environment, we did the BRW triathlon together as a group. We went to the ANZ staff ball together as a group. We just did stuff together, and we all enjoyed each other's company. And I think we genuinely came into work every day to see each other. Like, that's how close we were. And that's and I think that was just the whole thing from the start was just creating a close-knit group of people with diverse backgrounds that would complement each other and just create a really great team. And because we were working in a distressed environment, you needed people that could lean on each other.
Yeah.
And some of the friendships that were formed in that group are still really strong today. And that was sort of 7 years ago. So
if you could pinpoint one reason why you were such a tight-knit group, or could you pinpoint what that would be?
I think I was very lucky that, so I had a team in Melbourne, a team in Perth, and a team in Brisbane, and we sort of managed nationally from those three key centres. But I think the great thing was that the leaders that were in those, like particularly the one actually all of Melbourne, Perth, and Brisbane were all great as well, and they sort of drove that culture really strong. So I think picking those sort of direct reports right with similar sort of values and that similar team approach really drove that connectedness and cohesion as well.
Yeah.
So,
did you enforce behaviours? Like, did you create expectations? Did you say these are the values that we work to and we're going to hold each other account? What was your way of creating that culture where these leaders felt empowered to continue it and work to it and create a better environment for all?
Yeah.
Did you set some direction for them?
Well, I guess as an organisation, we set our values. We've got our iCare values at ANZ, but I think it was just more probably the level of communication. Like, even though that we were scattered around the place, like we would talk a couple of times a day on the phone. We'd always be talking about what's happening, and I think that just high level of communication created clarity, and we could always vent to each other if we. Yeah. Because sometimes there's certainly times of conflict when you don't agree with an approach taken to handling matters when you're in distress, and you might get told by a senior just, to do something in terms of let's just resolve it this way when you want to resolve it another way. And sometimes, and I think just that communication gives you the ability to bounce stuff off each other and not sort of build it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that level of communication creates trust, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then with trust, it creates the ability to engage and work well together.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that festers on itself. I think once you build a good culture with good leaders in place, you naturally attract the good talent as well. So it's self-fulfilling. You just keep building on a good team. And so some of the talent that we attracted to our team that's sort of gone on through the organisation, it's probably one of the proudest things I look back on. And I did send it to my boss the other day. I sent him a note to say, I was in Brisbane the other day and I saw, I listed off 3 or 4 people that have progressed through the organisation. I said, we recruited these people in, and it makes me really proud to see their progression. It's probably the best thing ever as a leader. And he came back and agreed. So
it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Your career in sport, if we just jump back into that.
Yeah.
I'm one that pushes this quite a fair bit, actually. I believe fundamentally sport, specifically team sport, creates a really great foundation for people who want to move on into the career, into the corporate world or into business in general.
Yeah.
Do you believe that your background and obviously playing high level in was it VFL and the waffle that you played? Yeah, that the high level of football, the AFL football that you played, contributed to your success as a leader and managing a team?
Yeah, 100%. I've always, probably similar to yourself, I've always just watched leaders really carefully and just wanted to pick the best parts out of them and why they're successful. So I guess I wasn't heavily involved, but I was on Collingwood's VFL list in 2010, which is probably just in the lead up to when I took my first leadership role. And Mick Malthouse was coaching Collingwood at the time. But what Mick was really well known for is that he knew the individuals in his team really well, and he knew how to make them fire. So, he'd know exactly what triggered he'd know your interest and what triggered you and how to make sure you could perform as an individual.
Did he spend
as part
time?
of the team.
Did he spend time with you on that? Like,
not me directly because I was on the VFL list, but this is just what I'd heard and the way I saw him interact with players. So, one of the first things I did as part of my first leadership role was I sat down with every individual of the team and I had a list of questions. How long have you been in the bank? What's your background of your career? What's your family situation? Where do you live? So I knew how far they were from the office to home. So I got an idea of their commute time and their pressure and just what their their home environment was as well as their work environment. Yeah. What sort of motivated them, what they wanted to do next. So just getting to know the person and how to make them perform. And I think, when I look back, a lot of that did come from sport. And I just think that whole doing the right thing for the team and people who've worked for me in the past probably get sick of the sporting analogies. But, it's true. Like if everyone plays their role and you do the right thing for the team, the scoreboard takes care of itself. Like
you could not get a more cliche.
I know you could not get more cliche, but I guess in corporate world, sometimes you get so focused on the numbers.
Absolutely.
You get so focused on the surveys and the outcomes, but you've just got to focus on doing bit by bit right and everyone playing their role right. And all that other stuff just takes care of themselves. So, definitely focusing on our people first, which I think is another thing that gets missed by a lot. We sort of focus more, I guess, on the customer and the outcome. But if you don't focus on your people, they won't service your customers as well as they should. And you won't have as happy customers and then your results won't be as good as well. So I think there's a process there you need to follow to get to the outcome, not focusing on the outcome. And I get very critical of leaders who put their priorities up and they'll have, customer, financials, our compliance and then people. And sometimes they don't even have people on there. I'm like, hey, hang on, your people should always be at the top.
Yeah.
And it's the same in sporting. Like unless you've got your people on the field, you can't perform. So you've got to start with your people and their health and making sure they're at their best fitness they can be, making sure in their best mindset they can be when they take the field. Otherwise, your chance of winning is slim, right?
Absolutely.
So why wouldn't you focus on, from an organisation perspective, making sure our people are in the best environment they can be when they come to work, and I guess in this environment at home as well, making sure their home setup's well, but also making sure they've got the capability to execute on their role really well and they don't get that anxiety in terms of, am I doing this right? And I guess just building that other piece, which you would know well, is it's not just always up to the captain. You need a number of captains on the field and a number of people to speak up and give you feedback. So creating that culture is really important as well. So
doing the 1%ers is
doing the 1%ers, mate. All that. But I think there's so much that sport can learn from the corporate world, and corporate can learn from the sporting world.
Vice versa, right?
So
just on the 1%ers, there, like my coach drummed into me time and time again. My football coach, cricket coaches, was always about doing the 1%ers. It was doing the little things, and they accumulated in the big things.
Yeah,
there's even talk, my coaches didn't go to this extreme, but I think I can't remember. What's the name of the Chicago Bulls coach that took them all?
Phil Jackson.
Yeah. Was it Phil Jackson or was? Yeah. Or it was one NFL. I can't remember which one it was, but it was his number one rule was to wear good socks.
Okay.
Right? And wear great socks that were made properly and your feet would feel comfortable. Because if you didn't wear the right socks, they could crease up, you could get blisters, and you would spend less time on the court.
Yeah.
Right? So the 1%ers, they're the little things. Everyone, so that he ordered good socks for the whole team to make sure that they didn't get blisters, which meant they met more court time.
Yeah.
So those sort of things have really stuck with me in my career, purely for the preparation point of view, doing the right things and time again.
You would know as well. I think it's James Clear in Atomic Habits or Building Sustainable Habits that talks about 1%ers as well and the little things. And I think he spoke about, I think it was a cycling team who even took their pillows.
They
took their pillows and they designed their trucks so no dust could get into their gears and things like that. So they did all these 1%ers and obviously the performance came through as well. But yeah,
absolutely. And when we translate that into numbers and doing the 1%ers and actually treating our people right, what I'm really interested in is, did you focus on that when growing your team, or is that something that you've developed and grown into over time, or is it just sort of give out people the right environment for themselves to flourish?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a natural way that sort of evolved into my leadership, or the way that I lead in terms of the first couple of teams that I led, which were different to, I guess, coming to Adelaide and leading a bigger team that I couldn't necessarily see as much. The first two teams I led obviously were, the first one was Melbourne, Perth, Brisbane. I could get to see all those staff quite regularly. And I was in touch with those leaders, every day in those offices. The second leadership role I had was just Vic Taz's role, leading corporate agribusiness and our emerging corporate in regional. But that was a smaller team, and we were together all the time. So you could lead face to face. And then when I came, so it was always, so when you're there, I think that collaboration and cohesion's a lot easier to drive.
Yeah.
You get that instant feedback. You're talking all the time, so you can be really clear. But when you go to lead a team that's very vast, and I remember talking to a good friend of mine, Shane McCurry, who does a lot of work with a lot of organisations, but mainly probably known for his work with Richmond Footy Club when he went there in 2017 around culture. And I'm like, I just need to get my head around trying to drive this workforce that I can't actually see. Like they're everywhere, all through South Australia, Northern Territory. And, I can't, sometimes it's just one person in one office in Narracourt, for example. So I guess I had to build on communication strategies around a weekly email or a weekly video to the team. And the team here were really a group of great experienced bankers who knew what they were doing, but our growth was just flat. Like we weren't. So, and there was a severe lack of just engagement. Like I think people are doing what they'd done for a while and good at what they did. But I guess the key thing for me was I was at a leadership conference with ANZ in 2018. So I was only sort of probably 5 months into the role, and the boss asked a question the first day of the conference. We all had to split up, and I think we're in about 12 or 13 groups. There was probably about 6 or 8 per group. And he just said, if there was one thing you could focus on to drive performance in your business, what would it be? And we sort of went down the path of processes and policies and things like that. And that's the discussion that our group got into. And I just said, everyone, what if we just focused on the well-being of our people? And, well-being's a bit of a buzzword now, but it wasn't that long ago when it was sort of that sort of fluffy word that people was like, oh, yeah. And we sort of fleshed it out, and I just sort of said, look, I think the team that I have is highly capable. I just think the engagement needs to lift, and we just need to show a bit more care and just make a positive change for our people to make them feel better about coming to work and focus more on their well-being and being the best versions of themselves. And another cliche there, but it's funny because we actually picked that as our group to mention. And we were the only group out of the 12 or 13 to mention well-being, and we spoke about it. The following day...
This was pre-pandemic, you said?
This is pre-pandemic. Yeah, this is early 2018.
Yeah.
But the following day we came back and you had to do the exercise again. About 10 of the 12 groups said we want to focus on well-being of our people.
So you planted the seed.
So it was kind of just... And then for me, that was validation to go, actually, this is on the minds of everyone. People just haven't been talking about it. So
what was it? Sorry, what was it about the well-being? Was it the lack of engagement that sort of threw you, or were you seeing some distress in your team?
Yeah,
obviously with the type of work that you were doing.
And I just think people were just going through the motions. Like there was just, like I said, they're highly capable, but just turning up, going through the motions, no excitement, none of that sort of team cohesion, and I take a strategy day. The first one that I attended. Was just all about, we had all our product partners come in. It was all about just products, policies, procedures. And then the next one that I actually ran as the leader, which I had some control over, we had like Tom Neame come in and talk about his seven secrets to well-being. We had James Morrison come in, the world's best trumpet player, come in and talk about culture, and he does a brilliant talk around the why, like similar to, I guess, Simon Sinek's well known for his pieces around the why, but James Morrison's a brilliant motivational speaker as well, and he's just one of the cleverest guys you'll ever meet. But he came in and we talked a lot around community, culture, well-being, all this sort of stuff. And at the end of it, people were just wowed, I guess. They came up and said, "Oh, we've never seen anything like that. There's never been so much of a heavy focus on us." And I guess the radical part for us was, I don't think it was that radical. We always have promoted flexible working, but we just said we want everyone to spend 4 hours of their work week dedicated to their own health and well-being, whatever that means to you. Like, there's nothing specific around it. Doesn't mean you have to go for a run or walk, but the team actually, it did catch on, and people were doing some amazing things. And I'd get feedback. People would go for a walk at lunch and said, "Oh my God, I've come back. I'm so much more productive now that I've done that. I've cleared my head. If I had been at the desk all day, I would have been just going through the motions." Groups were going for runs together at lunchtime. One guy moved house and the whole team went and helped him out for an afternoon. I think we had about 6 people quit smoking.
Wow.
It was just that it just fed through. And I guess where that came from was a good friend of mine, Shane, who I mentioned earlier in the piece, was at Richmond in 2017. And he came and spoke to our group early on, and he spoke about how one of the things they did at the start of 2017, they looked at the training program of the group, and they actually cut the training program down by 20% and gave it back to the players and said, this is your own time now. If you need to do a top-up session, you do a top-up session. If you need to focus on, go and get a massage or well-being or recovery, you do that. So it's your time, it's your well-being. And I thought, well, 20%, that's a full day. It's probably a bit much, but I can probably do 10%, which is 4 hours if you sort of work to a 40-hour week, which a lot of people wouldn't. But that's kind of the old piece.
Did you do it over? Was it 4 hours in one hit, or was it 4 hours over the week?
No, you just spread it over the week.
What if someone did 5? Like, were you monitoring that?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
It was just a message. It was a pure message where set yourself a target to set 4 hours out of the week dedicated to your own well-being. Some people, but I think the flow-on effect, even some of the parts of the community talking about, where one guy going coaching his son's junior football team, so he'd leave twice a week at 4 o'clock or something. So and he was known he was in Darwin. He was known in that community as the banker up there, and they said, "Oh, you get time off how do you get the time off to come and do this?" And he said, "Well, we get told we get promoted to take 4 hours a week to dedicate to our well-being. So I do this as part of my well-being. I coach my son's footy team." That's amazing. They're like, "Wow, that's very good of the organisation to do that." So it sort of starts to feed through
the community
as well. Yeah, and obviously adds benefit to the community because you get people going to do that sort of thing as well. So
there's you talk about the 80-20 rule, not so much from a well-being point of view, but the Googles, the Atlassians, the Microsoft, these sort of companies, they do allow that 1 day a week, but more from the point of view of the staff being able to spend it on the work that they enjoy doing. Yeah. Right. And you get things like Jira and Gmail and all those sort of creative ideas come from the day where it's like you can move away from your everyday work and do something that you love, and then all these great ideas can come out of it. And the health and well-being aspect is the same thing. It just adds so much more benefit to their own lives and being able to connect with family and being able to go home as a more mentally fit, going home as opposed to being run down and drained all the time.
You'd know yourself from going for a run. How many ideas go through your head when you go for a run?
Absolutely. Especially when you listen to a podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, you're right. Do you place a lot of emphasis on your health? I mean, you're obviously a good-looking, strapping young man. I mean, do you put a lot of time and effort into your own health?
I have this year, and look, it's been up and down. I mean, I always when you're playing sport at a high level, even at a local level, and you'd leave work, right at 4:30 or 5 to get to training on time, you'd find you're always getting the work done, and sometimes a lot more productive. So that's, I guess, the other thing in the back of my mind that's validated, that when you stay fit and you actually dedicate time to that, and you put deadlines in place in your calendar to get stuff done, you actually do get things done. And but look, I guess the first year I became a leader, I it was the same year I quit football.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the second year I was a leader was the year I quit football, and I didn't do anything for that entire year. And that's probably the worst I've felt ever. And I just said to my boss, I'm just running 100 mile an hour. I'm not dedicating any time. I've just had my first child as well. So you know what that's like. You get the interrupted sleep to go with it. So then that, I went through that for 12-month period, got back into my health and fitness. Another point of interruption was probably, every time you have a child, I think when you get this disrupted sleep, it does impact your routine. So I guess there's, when I talk to people about well-being, sometimes it's circumstantial in life as well. Sometimes you can't help what happens, so you can't always be dedicated to going to the gym. But this year in particular, I've focused a lot on it, and for me, it's been 3 or 4 times a week at the gym every morning. So just get up and go at 6 o'clock. From 6 till 7, I'll be at the gym 3 to 4 mornings a week. Always have a really healthy breakfast to start with, whether that's a sort of veg fruit sort of smoothie and something pretty basic for breakfast. But I'm sort of always thinking about it from that perspective. And it's interesting, what probably kicked me into gear, and we've spoken about this, was there was a book that I read at Christmas that my mum gave me called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And
that changed my life as well.
Yeah. And I know others have said the same thing. Like he's an interesting guy if you're listening to him on a podcast.
Very alpha male.
Yeah. But I just think the power in his mind to do some of the things that he's done.
Correct.
And when he talks about the lengths that he's pushed his mind to build resilience, and he sort of references it to like when you go to the gym and you get the calluses on your hands. He talks about, getting the calluses in your brain so that you can push yourself harder. And I just think he probably made me reflect and go, I need to have a bit more discipline, get back into what works best for me. Yeah. And not, he's a no excuses sort of guy, isn't he? And he was brutal. Like for a guy to go through the SEAL testing 3 times or something. And
what was it called?
And he
not Death.
Hell Week.
Hell Week.
He got through Hell Week 3 times, which is probably, and plus he did, was it Rangers and then Delta Force or something?
He ran the whole week on broken shins.
Yeah.
That was, he used duct tape to hold himself up. Like it's almost stupid.
Yeah.
But when you talk about calluses on the mind, I think that was the one thing out of that book that really stuck with me. How do you build those calluses on the mind, on your brain?
Yeah.
The calluses being, obviously the grit and the resilience that you can build by pushing yourself. That book was the reason why I decided to run at the start of the year. I listened to that book late last year. I decided to run 1,000 kilometers for the year. I just went, bugger it. And, then coupled with Atomic Habits, which you've just mentioned, I thought, what a better way. 1,000 kilometers is 3K a day. It's 16 minutes a day. Yeah. I can hit that. Not a problem. And I started doing it. And now I think, I'm probably sitting at about 1,400 kilometers so far this year. So I've eclipsed the 1,000 and I'm trying to get to the 1,500 mark. I don't think I'll get there, but by the end of the year. But that has built so many more, and I've felt invigorated coming back into work every single day. You do have more energy. It might sound silly. You're doing 15, kilometer runs now, and you've got more energy. It doesn't make sense, but it actually does work.
Yeah, I think. I haven't followed Tony Robbins a lot, but he has, something about the guru or something on Netflix. And I did watch that one just out of interest.
Yeah, I am not your guru.
Yeah, but he was very big on just finding the energy. Yeah. And I think that is the key to a lot of things, finding your energy. So it does come with, like you said, going for a run helps you find the energy. I know he does a lot of sort of that cold therapy as well. He's got the plunge pool. And, that's something that I've got involved in the last 12 months or more, thanks to actually Alex Laws, who I'm not sure whether you know, but she's a local as well, who used to be, I think she competed in the Commonwealth Games and was a sport, like a personal sort of sports coach in the US, but she's now based in Adelaide. But she's big on cold therapy. So I've been doing the cold showers for nearly 12 months, and I find that helps as well.
Have you read the Wim Hof book?
I haven't read the Wim Hof. I've heard a lot about it. But
it's got the breathing.
The breathing in
that
it.
goes with the cold.
But I think just finding those elements to just give you energy, like even I try and time my coffees at the right time during the day to make sure that gives you that little bit of kick when you need it as well. But I think that is critical, finding the energy. And but also with that, making sure you get the right rest and recovery at night.
Do you question for you in this, not anywhere in the notes or anywhere we spoke about, but do you find that just getting older, you start noticing, because when you're young playing footy, cricket, whatever it might, playing sport, you have so much energy. You just there's always this sort of pocket spare that you can draw on.
Yeah.
As you get older, you realize, no, I really need to concentrate on eating the right foods, sleeping, maintaining this vessel which is carrying my brain around the whole time.
Yeah.
Like it becomes so much more important the older you get.
Yeah, I think you have to be more deliberate around it. I think I read another book I'm sort of reading at the moment is Fearless by Pippa Grange. And I guess as you get older, you sort of understand things a bit more and how your body works. And I think obviously your metabolism does slow down. You're not as strong. So when you go to the gym, you can't think you're 20 anymore. Otherwise you will just do an injury. So I'm very conscious of not trying to lift too much, because then you'll get tight through the neck. And then when you're working at a desk all day, that just builds into more problems.
And then you walk down the street and all of a sudden your back goes.
Exactly. But I think, particularly as you go through, I guess, the middle of your life, you are having kids, you're getting more disrupted sleep. That's also a time when you're probably taking on, you buy your own home and all this sort of stuff. So you're taking on debt. For you, it's like starting a new business. For me, it's taking on a different leadership role and moving state. So you've got all those pressures that you didn't have when you were younger either. And I think it does disrupt your sleep. You're taking clients out, so you may not eat as healthy. If you're traveling, having traveled recently, like, it does take it out. When you go to Perth and there's a 2.5 hour time difference from here, and you leave at 7 and you land at 7, and then you go out for dinner that night, like, it's a huge day. It actually does start to take it out of you. And we probably don't, you notice that once you pick it up again. But I think when you were in that rhythm pre-COVID, you just sort of took it for granted. But they're the sorts of things that would run you down. I think that's where you just have to, pause and take note of it a bit more and make sure you are looking after yourself. So,
Going back to the wellbeing stuff that you're doing, we digressed and went down a rabbit hole, so we'll come back up, which is great.
That's good.
The wellbeing of your team, you said that they were flat, they weren't getting the results, it was a big stagnant, whatever it might be. Once you introduced the 4-hour rule, not rule or way, did you see improvement in the team? Did you see improvement in results?
We saw a huge improvement, and I think it's probably, we can't put it down just to that individually. I think there was a moment I guess there was that moment, but there was also, I guess, the beauty of it was, again, the leadership team that were underneath me all resonated with them. So they all went pretty hard on it as well. And we had WhatsApp groups with our teams, and we were sending stuff around what we were doing. So you'd take a video at the gym or something like that and start to promote it. But we also changed our structure a little bit. So, and I think that also helped us. We changed our structure so we had a bit more of a focus on building capability of our team and being faster for our customers as well, and just creating more support for our team. So there's a few little structural things we changed as well within the business. So I think wellbeing was a big key part of it. I think also just changing the structure a little bit helped as well. But we saw huge uplift in numbers. Like, I think, the KPMG report that was done around wellbeing that said for every $1 you spend on wellbeing, you get $1.30 back. So it's a good return on investment. But, the results that we saw far outweigh that. Like, and I think the key thing for us was I always thought getting a result on other blocks would be easy. The hard part's always sustainable results. And I think for initiatives like that around wellbeing, if you bring it in, the danger is it sort of wears off on people. They'll get very enthusiastic about looking after themselves and doing something different, but then it dies off. So you've got to actually come up with new ways or new people. One of the keys for me has been, I'm certainly not an expert in this space, but we've got some amazing resources locally here in Adelaide, and there would be in every state. But, for me, it's been Tom Neame of Healthy Minds. It's been Beck Smith from SAMRI. People like that, just getting them in to do, might only be a 30-minute talk, or just educating people on the neuroscience of the mind and how your brain works when you're feeling this way or that way. And particularly when we went into lockdown, we had Beck come in and do a session around how you might be feeling and stuff like that. I think that all helps
Absolutely.
people, just educate our people on the way they might be feeling and thinking. So, but yeah, I think ultimately, if you are creating, as we said at the start, the best environment for your people, the capability, that well-being piece around making sure that they're bringing the best version of themselves. Ultimately, what drives business is productivity. So if your people are feeling good, they'll be more productive.
Yeah.
When they're more productive, you're going to get results.
You get results.
I think it's about, but you've got to go on a journey. It's not just, we'll introduce this and your job's done.
Yeah.
It's like culture. It's forever evolving, and you got to change with it.
And it's part of an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Both Beck and Tom, I've seen. I know Beck, and I've spoken. I've never spoken to Tom. Seen him speak, I should say. Both targets for this podcast. I want to get them on. Beck and I are actually organising a catch up shortly. The piece that I'm interested in that is because that was a question that I was going to ask is, you introduced a 4 hour idea of spending that time on your health and well-being. It can become stagnant over 6 months. You introduce new people; these sort of things can fall away. You know, is there? I mean, do you hold people account to that as a leader? Do you say, "Have you done your 4 hour?" Like, what do you do to make sure that people are actually putting time and effort into? Because some might not see the importance, or the younger folk that are coming through might think, I'm fine. I've got enough energy. I could keep pushing. I can burn the candle at both ends and get through. And what do you do as a leader for people who are acting that way?
I think ultimately you have to get them to be self-driven around it. You can't actually force people. I think it's the ability to offer it, to educate people, and to try and get others to embrace it around them as well. And then naturally, I'm not one to force stuff on people, so I won't just go, yep, you've definitely got to do this. I'm going to hold you account to your 4 hours. It might be something that just pops up in conversation. If I was having a coffee with one of my team, I'd say, how's your health and well-being? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you spending the 4 hours? And just in casual conversation like that. But then I guess they'll sort of notice it, because you are bringing people in every couple of months to talk around a well-being topic and things like that. And it just starts to get embedded in the organisation a bit. So the problem with there's a lot of apps coming out around the well-being.
Yeah.
You'll find, and a lot of challenges and things like that, you'll find that and I know you've been involved in it before, so I'd be keen to get your views as well, but you find that there's a huge spike in uptake at the start, and then it just peters off. So the key, and whoever finds it's probably going to do extremely well, but the key is to try and find that uptake. And of course it's going to come off a little bit, but to keep that engagement at a reasonably good level. But ultimately it has to be self-driven at the end of the day. I don't think people can, I think for leaders, you offer the education, you put on the agenda. So I think one thing that we did do as a business, we had it on the agenda for every meeting that we had. Yeah. How's the well-being of our people? Do we need to be doing more, or is there anyone in particular we need to be concerned about? Those sorts of conversations, which drive other conversations. But I think ultimately you've just got to create a platform where people can drive it themselves.
You have to, as a leader, lead by example as well, right?
Exactly.
A lot of the petering off that we see is purely, and it comes from, this is what I want because I've heard it's a good thing to do for the team, and this might get me more productivity, and it's introduced for the wrong reasons. Yeah. And it might be some uptake, and you might have some, early adopters that jump on it and go, this is great, and bring people along for the ride. Yeah. But if leadership, and this goes with anything, right? This goes with culture, this goes with business improvement, this goes with well-being. If leaders aren't on board and they're not acting, or they're not contributing to the everyday success of what they're actually trying to achieve, and leading in a way where people can look to and say, actually, you know what, this is something, I am seeing improvement in his or her attitude. Yeah. Therefore, that might be, and I'm getting the benefit from that. Maybe that's something that I can do. Yeah. And people do have the tendency to look up and see what their leaders are doing. Yeah. And if they're not doing it, then if it's not good enough for them, then why do I need it? You know what I mean? Like, that's where those.
Yeah, and I think there's so many avenues to tackle. Like, fitness is one thing, as you know. Yeah. Diet is as a society, I think we don't understand food well enough. And as you know, I'm a massive fan of James Mukey and the work that he's doing, and he certainly pointed a few things out to me.
James's podcast blew my mind when we sat down with him. Yeah. It just Some of the work he's doing is amazing.
Yeah. So it's food, and then the other thing I mentioned, like around that rest and recovery, I don't think there's enough emphasis around rest and recovery as well, making sure. I think Sean Accor in his podcast around big potential talks about, for him, something he does is just create that. He finds the times of the day when he's at his most vulnerable, and he says it's the first half an hour when he wakes up and the first half an hour before he goes to bed, to make sure he starts the day well, but also finishes the day well, so he can get a good rest. And so he calls it creating a moat around his day, and that the first 30 minutes of the day is for him, and the last 30 minutes of the day is just for him to unwind as well. So finding things like that. There's so many facets.
There's your tiny habits again, or atomic habits.
Yeah, exactly. And like Tom with his 7 secrets to well-being, he's got 7 elements of the wheel. So there's always different elements you can focus on as well. So there's plenty of training to be delivered.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
I think as leaders, when you're not going to get it right all the time, right?
Yeah.
At least we can show that we're giving it our best.
Yeah,
We have to be vulnerable in that moment too.
Yeah,
we're not always going to get it right, and we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to have ups and downs. But as long as we're seen to be looking to improve or trying to improve every day, it's critical.
Yeah.
Well, you've mentioned a lot of books, reading. You talked about you researched the psychology piece a lot earlier in your leadership career. How much emphasis, and it obviously seems like a lot, but how much emphasis have you placed on your own personal development? I asked the question from the point that I feel like, as part of SynergyIQ and the work we do with businesses, we go in and we work with leaders, right? And we help them. So we've got coaches in our team who can come in and look at their behavioral aspects, look at the way their brain works, all the above, and we can help them through their leadership journey. The big part of me that always really tries to drum home is that you can do all the leadership coaching you want. You get an hour or two with a coach. You might see him once every month or every 3 months, or however the sessions are. But if you're not going home and spending time on yourself, trying to develop yourself, whether it is with health, whether it is with your fitness, whether it is with your mindset, whether it is your communication, whatever it might be, if you're not trying to improve yourself every day, driven individually, then I believe you're actually almost pushing shit uphill. Right? I believe it's a really tough gig to improve without actually. So the question of how much emphasis do you place on your own personal development?
Structurally, not a lot. Like, I don't do a lot of courses or anything, but probably similar to yourself. I do enjoy reading. I'm not a huge reader because you read most of the day, you're reading stuff. So sometimes when you get to bed, you kind of want to switch off. Although I do try to get in the habit of just do one chapter of something or just do something. But even if I want to sit down and relax at night, even to watch a Netflix or something, I'll try and find something that's of interest.
Yeah.
But even if it's something different, I'll try and take out the key points. So I've never been a Formula One fan, but watching F1 Drive to Survive on Netflix,
apparently it's amazing.
It is amazing, and what I got out of it was the leaders of each team and the team principles. And there's the Mercedes who've won the last 7 championships in a row, potentially get knocked off by Red Bull this year, but their team principal, Toto Wolff, he's just he's just an amazing leader by the looks. Just watching that show, and there was one particular episode where Mercedes had a shocking day. Something happened with the car, and Netflix are in his face. What do you think about this? And he's just gone, no blame, no one. We have a no blame culture here. We just diagnose the problem, we learn from it, we'll fix it, and we'll be better next time. And if you YouTube him on no blame culture, like he's just an incredible mind. He's obviously been incredibly successful at venture capital or whatever he did before he was team principal at Mercedes. And then there's Christian Horner of Red Bull, and you sort of just watch all these team principals and how competitive they are. And so I think even, if I'm just watching something, I always try and take those bits out of it around leadership as we as we spoke about.
But I think that comes from the simple fact that you have put time and effort into your growth development. Like, there are so many people that would watch that, and I'm just saying this off the cuff, I don't actually know. I believe there would be so many people who would watch that and not even pick up those words.
Yeah.
You know, the no blame culture. It wouldn't even be part of the thing. It'd be just watching the TV show to go straight over their head.
Yeah.
And then they would carry on and like the excitement that comes with the TV show. So
Yeah.
I'm the same as you. Like, I watch you've got 3 young kids there. Yeah, where our kids are about the same age, mine are 10 and 9. But when they were growing up, they used to love that movie Sing.
Yep.
I don't know, you see Sing with that koala.
Yeah.
And he started a business. It fell. It hit he lost all the money and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then he restarted again. And he said this line, like, the number one thing about hitting rock bottom is that there's only one way, and that's up. And that's like those sort of in a kid's movie, right? So I am the same as you. I do very much try to pick out the opportunities to learn and grow in everything that I watch. Yeah. But does that come with the years and time and effort that you've put into, or is that just something that everyone does?
I'm not sure. I mean, like I said, I've always observed leaders and always wanted to pick out the best parts of the people that I've enjoyed working for, and also seen their bad habits and say I need to avoid that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm similar to you. Like I read books to the kids every night as well, and watch movies with them. And I think some of the key messages, funnily enough, I spoke about Shane, the Richmond Football Club earlier. I think, he does introduce some of the kids' books into their themes just because of the key messages in there. There's some powerful messages when you go back to some of those books, and and I love reading some of those books to the kids and taking away some of those key messages. And in fact, just recently, so you'd know The Good Dinosaur as well.
Oh yeah,
and so in the book,
one of my favorites.
So I've seen the movie, but I was reading the book the other night, and our theme for this year for our team, because we've got lots of new people in our team, is all around collaboration and bringing everyone up to speed and making sure that we collaborate together as a team, but also with our stakeholders and customers, and really drive that. And I sort of said, and also making your mark's really important. And from The Good Dinosaur, there's a passage that says, making your mark is doing something big for something other than yourself. And I just thought that was really powerful, because if you're always thinking about doing something for someone else, how good that makes you feel, but also how that can help you progress as well. And they've got their mark on the silo, that their dinosaur footprint. Yeah. So I guess our slogan is just like making your mark. Like that's sort of, and that's just coming from a kid's book. So.
Absolutely, and that analogy is kind of where this podcast was born from. Yeah. I mean, in what world or what realm can you connect and collaborate with people, learn about their lives? So they're sharing, right? They're giving back, they're learning their experiences, but then in the same token, you're learning. So that's why, for me, this podcast is just amazing. I get some amazing people on the show like yourself telling me about your experiences and your learnings and your everyday occurrences in your workplace. That the giving back piece is the reason why you do this, because everyone wants to sort of share their story and help other people grow. I think it's fundamental in everyone.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there's plenty of content out there. I think that's the beauty. You can pick up a good book. You can listen to a podcast these days. You can watch, a good documentary on Netflix. We were talking even earlier around, World War II, and just, whilst there's some good learnings just to come out of what happened through all those battles, and how those particular leaders led through that. And whilst it's obviously, war's not something that's nice at all, but I think you can take some key learnings out of the way that people led through that. And
and the ego that he was involved with it.
Yeah,
you talked about Stalingrad before, and
it's really interesting, because obviously taking Stalingrad wasn't part of the plan of the Nazis, but Hitler's ego got the better of him and wanted to take Stalingrad because it had Stalin's name in it.
Yeah.
And I think the other interesting part of that, so that the Germans put so much effort into that battle, which they ultimately didn't win, but they were completely on top because the Luftwaffe had bombed Stalingrad, and then they had the heavy artillery. But interestingly, the leader that Stalin put in on the Russian side to lead it after a few months and things weren't going well, he put a new leader in there. The leader actually based his his quarters right in amongst with the troops, so he could be really close, and was known to be very accessible for the troops, and he was getting the feedback. And he introduced close quarter combat because he knew that the Germans couldn't use their artillery if they were close quarter combat. So they'd only be me and you away, and they were sort of within the realms of just throwing a grenade. But that sort of helped them win. But you had a leader that was really close to the ground, got really close to his troops. Yeah, I guess some of the criticism of leadership is it's too high up and you're not close enough to your people, and you're missing the key point. You're going in the wrong direction, and you're not listening to what your people are actually saying. The other one we spoke about was the Battle of Midway, obviously, where the Japanese were well on top there and should have won. But the guy was so procedural. This Admiral Naguro was so procedural that, he ordered the planes to get ground artillery, weaponized with ground artillery, which took 2 hours to do. And they did that. And then they realized that the US fleet, as in their aircraft carriers, were actually within range or something. So they had to flip back to torpedoes to try and bomb the aircraft carriers. But he wanted to wait until the whole squadron was weaponized with this, rather than just sending them off once they were, sending off a smaller squadron once they were all geared up. But ultimately that allowed the time for the US to send their squadrons and ultimately beat them. But if he hadn't have been so, I've learnt in this book that you have to send the whole squadron as one.
Correct.
And he had just sent off smaller ones, they probably would have been successful.
It's being agile, right? It's
exactly.
This is the thing. I love the World War II analogies. I don't love the concept of war at all, but the analogies and the strategies that come out of it, and you just see the mistakes. For me, the whole World War thing, like if you talk about, dare we say his name on this podcast, he who shall not be named, Hitler. For me, sending, and the way you and I have spoken about the happiest man on earth, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Eddie Jackie.
Eddie Jackie, which rest his soul, he's passed away recently.
Yeah.
If you think about the way they were treated, so the leadership is saying, we're going to put you in concentration camps, and we're going to expect. The one thing that blew my mind in that whole piece was when he went after the war.
Yeah.
And then he went back into the real world.
Yeah.
And he's communicating with some of these people who treated him incorrectly, or however they were following orders. And his question to them was, how do you actually live with yourself? How do you commit those crimes? And so what I took, try to piece all the puzzle together, and, what it means to me. And it's who in their right mind in this day and age would listen to a leader like that?
Yeah.
And I wonder about the time and why they did.
Yeah.
If a leader ever asked, and if I only know the people within my circle, and that's those within Australia, but I could almost guarantee that anyone in my circle, if had leadership instructions to do that sort of stuff, would all just walk away and go, no, like I wouldn't. I'm not doing that. I wouldn't treat another human being that way. Yeah. And so that's the whole bit that really, really fascinates me about the war.
How people could go that far.
How they could go that far.
Yeah.
And the power and control that they needed, and the ego that was floating around. And I just think, wow.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I learned, which I didn't know through the documentaries recently, was that they called them the super army, but they're all on crystal meth. Yeah. Which then has an effect of reducing your empathy level as well. Yeah. So I think I didn't appreciate that until I watched until I was watching some of these documentaries. I can't remember the actual name of the drug, but obviously you go, well, that sort of makes sense as to why they're all slightly a bit crazy. But I don't even get your head around that. But the other, after reading Eddie Jackie's book, which was phenomenal, I actually used one of his quotes at the ANZ Community Ball earlier this year, in terms of the way he said, the gift of giving. And how powerful that is, and he couldn't understand why his dad would say that when he was young, but now, as he became older, he could really appreciate the ability of giving. But also read Viktor Frankl's book, who was which is Man's Search for Meaning, which was very similar to Eddie's, but he went through those concentration camps from a psychologist's perspective and told the story from
one of my
favorite
perspective.
And I think you and I might have spoken about this over a coffee, but the interesting part for me in that, and as my team are sort of have come out of lockdowns in Melbourne and Sydney is, Victor spoke of the issues people had once they left the concentration camps. When they were in there, they sort of lived in hope of the war ending, in hope of getting to the other side. But when they actually got out, and they'd sort of known that way for so long, they didn't know how to adapt back to society. And a lot of them actually suffered severe depression and things like that. So I think that sort of makes you think, well, when there is a significant change in people's lives or routines or things like that, that's when you really have to focus on that well-being piece as well. So
it's an interesting point. Do you believe coming out of the pandemic that we might see, like, when it doesn't become a thing, right now, everyone's like, I can't wait for it to get back to the
I think the big risk is the risk is burnout. For Sydney and Melbourne that have been in lockdown, the risk is burnout. And I think that, they've all been quite busy. There's been a lot of change through organisations through the pandemic. Most organisations are going quite well and have been quite busy, aside from obviously, the small businesses that have suffered.
Entertainment industry.
Exactly. But, you come out, you're going to feel the pressure, and people are going to want to do events, lunches with clients, travel back to the office. All this stuff takes up time in your day, and the work doesn't go away.
Yeah.
So they're going to have the work to do, but on top of that, the events. So there is a shift, and I think there is a risk of burnout, which is something you just got to keep front of mind. So I think that makes the step up around focus on wellbeing even more important during this time. Just as people change their routines, and just to say, hey, just be mindful of your own well-being, and making sure you don't feel as though you have to be, entertaining all the time over this period. It's important, but just make sure you're looking after yourself. And
have you got any strategies in place for the next 12 months of what your team would look like from a well-being point of view?
I guess the pleasing part about it is the boss and the boss's boss in my organisation is very focused on well-being. So it's being driven from the top, which is excellent to see. So I think it's good that you can just promote that consistent message from the top, which is really good. So it will be a focus, and we're certainly doing a lot of things around it. But again, I think it comes back to the discussions with your team and the communication around it. So it'll certainly be on the agenda a lot over the next 12 months.
So moving on from the wellbeing stuff, and we went down another rabbit hole there, and we got out of there, which is great. You are very involved with community.
Yeah.
Right? You do a lot for the community. Obviously, being in the realm head of health, that's your big part of your role, working with the health organisations.
Yeah.
Is it Australia-wide that you work with? Yeah. So the community, or the ANZ Ball is an interesting one. You've mentioned it a few times. What is your involvement there? And I know you're heavily involved, but can you explain to what the idea is and what you're actually hoping to achieve through the ANZ Ball, which is March
5th next year, in 2022. Look, obviously something I'm very passionate about, close to my heart. I guess I really love the ANZ purpose in shaping a world where people and communities thrive. I love that slogan, and I think with any purpose of an organisation, you've got to take that back to what it means to you and how you get energy from it. So when I spoke earlier around leading a large team that was in different areas that you couldn't actually see, we'd always start with community. What are we doing for the community, and then people, and then well-being, and then a bit on the business. So community was always a heavy focus. And what I found in the first year of the role was that we were supporting so many organisations that felt like we were doing something different every week. Like we do Badge Day for Royal Flying Doctors, which is one that we're very close to. But you'd give people for a day to sell badges, but you'd raise like $1,000, and we'd do the walk with Hutch Street, and you'd raise a few $100s or that. So we were doing something often, every week or every second week. I'd put in my note to the team, we're doing this, or someone's doing that, and I just felt we just weren't making an impact. We're doing a lot of little things, but not making an impact. Like, it was all great, but $1 or $2 grand's not going to shift the dial. And I guess the other part was we were also a major sponsor of Generations in Jazz down in Mount Gambier, which I hadn't heard of before I came to South Australia. But it's an amazing event where about 6,000 kids come together, and it's run by James Morrison, and he brings in these international artists, and it's an amazing weekend down in Mount Gambier. And funnily enough, and just by pure coincidence, Mark Menther, who I mentioned before, was chairman of he was on the board and then became chairman of Generations in Jazz, because I rang him up one day and said, "Do you know about this Generations in Jazz?" He said, "Yeah, I'm on the board." I said, "Oh, well, we're a major sponsor." And so we were down in Mount Gambier on that weekend. And then a couple of months later, I rang him and said, "I'd love to do something big from a charity perspective that would involve bringing a bit of Generations in Jazz to Adelaide. I've seen James Morrison, his Motown band, play live, love it. But rather than supporting one charity, could we support a number of charities?" And Mark, so it was all ideation. And Mark said, "Yeah, and you could get the band who wins the big band down there, which was Marriotteville that year." He said, "You could get them in to play over maybe Entree and Main." I said, "Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, what a great opportunity for the kids to play in front of 800 people with their idol, James Morrison." And then, I put the idea to our leadership team locally that probably thought I was a bit crazy. We had to find a way to do it. We're obviously not a charity, so we couldn't run the charity event. We found a way to actually get a charity to be the host charity, and then we become the major sponsor, and we effectively underwrite the event for the costs, and then actually managed to get a few sponsors on board the first year. And the beauty is that all the other sponsors, whatever they contribute, go straight to the bottom line, because our sponsorship covers the cost of running the event. So we had, first year, I think in Daly, we're a major sponsor. Kaysler Wines or Saint Scholar provided all the wines and a big package. So it's your typical night where you can come together, and we didn't want to make it like any charity event, like it was something different where you can come, and it's called the Community Ball because we want to showcase all aspects of the community of South Australia, and it's obviously an amazing place. So we've got amazing food, some of the best wine in the world, obviously a lot of craft beer producers, and now a lot of gin producers. This year's event, we had Southern Rock Lobster from down the Limestone Coast on the menu, Spencer Gulf prawns, and Smoky Bay oysters. And then some of the wines that were on the list were next level as well. We had Lobethal Beer House beer as our craft beer option. We had the guys from Hills Distillery donate gin for a gin bar. We had a couple of huge winery packages. And so the idea is people get a dining experience, they get an entertainment experience, because we've got the big band winners from Generations in Jazz, which just play a bit of light jazz over Entree and Main. We get James Morrison, his big Motown band, in concert after Main, and we also do a big live auction, silent auction, and a car raffle, and all that goes to the charities. So we usually put in 12 charities, and there's 6 majors, so 6 major charities all participate in the pool, and the other 6 charities walk away with a guaranteed $5,000. So this year we raised $335,000. So the major charities walked away with $50,000 each. And it's not just the money, because on the night we also do a short video that goes for about 5 or 6 minutes, where the charities can actually talk to the audience about what they do.
Yeah, and showcase their purpose and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. So, and look, to be honest, there's over 100 businesses locally that get involved in it now. And both events we've sold out. So we had 840 the first year, about 750 this year. We had to scale a bit back because of COVID. Next year's event's strictly limited to 760. And I think we've almost sold, we've got capacity for 32 corporate tables, which that's sort of a level of sponsorship. We've only got five to sell, and we've still got a few months to go. So I think it'll sell out easily enough. But there's some amazing additional sponsors on this year, like Channel 10, so they'll do all the filming. We've got LMS Energy, so the event's going to be carbon neutral as well. They're going to provide enough carbon credits to make sure it's carbon neutral. The guys at Hills Distillery, I think, are going to provide a whiskey bar as well. We're looking at a champagne bar as well. Callum Hahn from MasterChef, and he's got his business 11, and Sprout here is going to work with Gavin Robertson, the head chef, to create a pretty cool menu. So So it's a bit of fun. Like it's just one of those nights where, Marty Palmer, I'm not sure if you know Marty, but he's famous for, the pubs around town that he owns. But I loved his comment when he came to the first one later that night. He said, I was getting the suit on for another charity ball. And he's like, do I need to go to another charity ball? I feel like I'm going to these all the time. He said, but mate, that's one of the funnest nights I've ever had. And I said, that's the biggest compliment you could get, for people to turn up and say, this is fun, and know that they're getting that charity connection. I think the beauty of supporting a number of charities is that you would hope that at least everyone in the room's got a connection with one of those charities at least. Apart from Variety, which obviously supports a variety of charities, there's not too many other opportunities where you can go to a charity ball and you've absolutely got a connection, or you think everyone in the audience got a connection with that charity. And I think for the event, for the community ball, I think everyone can get in that room and go, yep, I've got a connection with at least one of those charities, which is the brilliant piece. And it's diverse as well in terms of the major charities for next year are Backpacks for last year. Operation Flinders are the host this year, so that's teenage well-being, effectively.
Yeah, great.
SAMRI, which is obviously famous for the research they're doing. Zoos SA, so the conservation arm, so focusing on I guess the environment and conservation.
Love Elaine. We've had Elaine on the show.
Yes, you have too. Elaine's brilliant. And I think the live auction will have some sort of Monado package with the accommodation and the glamping sort of offering up there with the whole safari experience.
That'd be amazing.
We've got the Jody Lee Foundation, so they were the host last year. They were the host this year. So obviously they're focused on bowel cancer prevention, which is the second largest cancer killer. And we've got Hutt Street Centre as well. So we're supporting the homeless. So it's a great variety of charities. And then the minor recipients with the guaranteed $5,000 is Backpacks for Kids, which we all know about, supporting kids that get displaced from homes, and Life Changer Foundation and the teenage wellbeing. The other major I didn't mention was Royal Flying Doctors, which is the other big one that's been in. Sight for All, which is James Mucky's one. So,
I was going to say, make sure James is in there.
Yeah, Generations in Jazz. So we do support a vast variety of organisations that do amazing work in the community. And look, it's had great feedback, and Yolumba's another big one that's come on board as a sponsor for next year. Pretty famous local winery. Andrew Kittle from Kittle Toyota's those guys are amazing. He provided a Corolla hybrid this year, and said he's going to go one better next year. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to throw in the car raffle.
It's all part of the auction, or is that raffle?
That's the car. That's the major raffle. So it's always exciting when someone wins a car on the night. So yeah, like I said, it's something that's been close to my heart. It's been, it's had some great success. We've raised over $560,000 with 2 events. So it's actually had that impact on the community that we want. That's great. I think it's the beauty of it is a community event. Everyone comes together. We support various causes in the community, and it's. I think when we touch on the wellbeing piece and purpose, I think that also, creates the better wellbeing for our staff, for the community, and just sort of feeds into all that as well. So,
kudos, mate. That's an amazing work you're doing there. Where was it your idea? Is it come from? I mean, obviously you said there was a few that you weren't too particularly happy with. Did you work with anyone to come up with that idea, or was it just yourself that was the brainwave?
The first call was to Mark Mentzer to flesh it out. The second call was to James Morrison to see if he'd get involved, and then I guess after that, it was talking to our leadership group, because we had to just work out whether we could. It was almost a mini cap raising to see if we got pull our funds together to sponsor the event.
Case together.
And then it was talking to it's amazing support from Solstice Media in Daily to get behind it and really promote it the last few years. But now sort of Glam Adelaide's involved as well, and Steve at Showcase. So there's a huge amount of support around it now. But that's sort of how it all came together. Was just an idea and saying how can we do this, make an impact, and have a bit of fun. So, and I think I don't know this for a fact, but I think the charity ball, the community ball that we had this year on the 14th of March was probably one of the first charity balls post COVID, and we came back from Christmas in January and went, we're going to press go, because we had to postpone the prior year. We actually got on the Wednesday, early March, it was, yes, it's a go. Friday we had word that the Grand Prix was going to be cancelled, and our event was going to be on the Saturday. And we went,
wow.
no, we can't run it. Morrison came out that afternoon and said from the Monday, events over 500 not allowed.
Oh, wow.
So technically we could have had it, but we just said no, for the safety and to curb the anxiety of guests, we just had to put it off. So we pushed it out to the following, or to this year effectively. But people sort of forget pretty quickly that, we had people from nearly every state come in for that event, and we only opened to Victoria like 7 days prior to the event, so we weren't opened up for long. But the other brilliant thing about that is that every supplier of the event knew that it was a charity event and just rolled everything forward as a credit. So yeah, the convention centre were great to deal with. All the sponsors were really supportive and right behind it. So everything just rolled forward to the following year. So,
brilliant.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for allowing me to give that a plug.
No, that's good. No, get along. I'll be there with bells on. I'm just looking at the time. We are well into the and probably looking to wrap up now. Want to ask just a quick question. What does the future for you look like? You obviously achieved a lot in your career and life, and there's been conversations with me that you're always keen to keep moving up the ladder and extending your output and value that you're adding to the world. What does it look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it's just progression. Like, I've always been quite competitive and love winning, but I'm not a win at all costs sort of people. I think the balance is got to be there. First and foremost, I just want to be a good father,
you got
good husband. Yeah,
kids.
yeah. So I mean, that's very important, and you have to balance that out. Like I said, I want to keep progressing through the organisation as far as that'll take me. But
CEO role one day. Touted as, mate. That's the only dirt I could find on you.
I don't know about that. But look, I think if you're growing and progressing and you're getting that self-satisfaction, that's really important. Yeah. But at the same time, I've got an amazing network of people and some great mentors out in the community. And who knows, one day could find myself in a role outside doing something completely different. And I'm open to exploring things. At the moment, I work for a great organisation and happy where I'm at. And like I said, keen to go as far as I can. But yeah, we'll see.
Is Adelaide going to keep you? I think that's the main question in that.
Well, unfortunately not. I'm moving back to Melbourne in the new year.
Oh, there you go.
Heading back. My role's technically based out of head office, and we're expected to head back to the office in the new year. So be back in Melbourne, which will be good for a few reasons. I mean, obviously the kids will be closer to their grandparents, which they haven't seen much of over the past couple of years. And for me, I'm involved in the family farm, which is sort of 3 hours north of Melbourne. So it'll be good to get up to the farm a bit more and get a bit more involved in that. And look, if all else fails in the corporate world, I can always go back to being a farmer.
Yeah, well, there you go.
With my brother. So look, that's a bit of fun. It's a passion project as well outside of work. But I think you need those things to take your mind away. It was good when I was playing footy because you always had footy as an outlet. Mm-hmm. For me, I guess it's the family, but it's also the farm as well. I probably talk to my brother for 5 or 10 minutes every day on the way to work or on the way home from work and just ask him what's going on and how he's going. And that gives me great satisfaction as well. So
brilliant.
Always feel as I can fall back on the farm if things don't go so well.
I think you're heading in the right direction from a corporate career as it looks anyway.
Thank you.
Quick fire questions as we wrap up the podcast. We've talked a lot of books. What is one book that you are reading right now?
Fearless by Pippa.
Pippa
Grange. Yeah.
Pippa is?
So she's probably more known for her psychology in sport, but she's also done a lot of work with corporates. She's probably most famous for the work she's done with the English soccer team, who I might get this wrong, but I think they've had a bit of a voodoo around penalty shootouts.
Yeah.
And I think she's worked with them to try and get their mindset right.
Clear the mind.
But I think again, it's more one of those books around psychology. And I think when we boil things down to it, a lot of the reasons why we act certain ways is because of an embedded fear. If you can get over that fear, you can handle yourself better. So I think, I'm probably halfway through that book, but and she's explaining, I guess why fear comes about. The next part of the book will be how you sort of overcome fear. So yeah, it's a really interesting book, and I just think she's a great intellect. So I enjoy her work.
We just had a podcast released recently, actually, with Vin Jang, and he's an international keynote speaker.
Yeah.
We asked about imposter syndrome and
Yeah.
getting up on the stage, and he talks about fear a lot, and he's got a few little tips and tricks and methods the way he overcomes his fear and getting up on stage. So it's worthwhile checking out that podcast.
Yeah, and the other podcast I've listened to recently was How to Develop Confidence in 90 Seconds by Dr. Joan Rosenberg, and she's I really loved her concept. So the 90 seconds piece is that she explains that fear basically only lasts 90 seconds. So if you get up to speak or you get asked a question or something, there's like a toxin that gets released in your body. But she said that goes away after 90 seconds. So if you can learn and you can sort of approach it from that perspective, you'll actually be able to overcome your fears a lot quicker. So if you actually understand that. So I'm not giving that the full justice it needs.
No.
But if you listen more to her and listen to that podcast with her, I find that fascinating as well.
Yeah, for me, fear's always been, and I've said this previously, it's the creation of something that hasn't happened, right?
Yeah.
Like we're fearing, and we're almost making assumptions. If you like talking about getting up on stage, you're making the assumptions that people aren't going to like you.
Yeah.
Exactly. All the above, it's things that haven't happened. Actually, Vin used in that podcast that we did with him, he used this really good analogy of, it's one of those things, if you look at like the horror movies, right, where you see the person running away from the murderer, right? At that point, we as human beings are more fearful and more anxious at that point when the person's running away than when the person turns around and faces the murder head on. There comes an element when we face our fears. We are much more or less anxious than what we are when we're trying to run away from them. So
that's a good point.
Yeah, those little analogies are just amazing.
Yeah.
What is one book that you've recommended more so than others?
This year it'd probably be the Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I think you've got to have the right audience to probably recommend. I don't know if it's a book for everyone. I think it resonates with me and probably resonated with you because of our deep sort of sporting background and that sort of thing as well. But that's probably one I've recommended a lot. And
did you audiobook it or did you?
No, I actually read it.
Oh, you read it?
Yeah.
Because the audiobook's brilliant as well. If anyone who doesn't want to jump into it, because he does a podcast. Mini 5-minute podcast at the end of every chapter.
Yeah,
he kind of gives a quick rundown and his mentality into it also.
Yeah, so in the book there's a cheat sheet at the end of end of every chapter, so it's probably very similar. But certainly, the Eddie Jacko book's brilliant. I've recommended that to plenty of people as well.
Throw in Viktor Frankl
and the Viktor Frankl one.
Search
I think that's a bit deeper. I think Eddie's book you could read cover to cover.
Yeah,
I think Victor's book, it's a bit slow and steady. You've kind of you sort of read a chapter or a passage and then it sort of triggers your brain to think sometimes, and you might have to read it again. So it's because he talks to it from, I guess, a psychologist's perspective. Correct. So it's a bit deeper and harder to read. So Eddie's, for a quick, easy read and a great read, Eddie's is probably better.
Yeah. But it's not so easy at times in the sense of the storyline. There's some parts in there and you go,
it pulls at the heartstrings a bit. Absolutely.
How did you get through it?
Yeah.
What is one lesson that's taken you the longest to learn?
One lesson that's taken me the longest to learn? Probably to abandon your ego. I think that's taken I guess for all of us, it's something we're probably grappling with, and you see it every day. And we spoke about the Battle of Stalingrad, which is a big ego play, but you see it everywhere. And sometimes I think you've just got to check yourself when you've got an opinion or something and go, is this just my ego, or am I seeing it through the right lens? So, do you
abandon it or do you manage it?
Well, that's a good question. I guess I use that word abandon because it comes out of the movie 7 Years in Tibet with Brad Pitt, and it's based on a true story with the Dalai Lama. And he says that in terms of the key as part of one of the keys to life is part of their way is around abandoning your ego. So it probably is managing it. There's probably is a bit of benefit of having a bit of ego sometimes to help you manage, but I think a lot of the times it can get in the way too. So,
Absolutely.
I think
there's a book by Ryan Holiday.
Yeah,
Ego is Your Enemy. If you haven't read that, get onto it.
I haven't, but I do like Ryan Holiday's work.
Yeah. If anyone is interested in that Stoic philosophy, Ryan is a leader in that realm.
Yeah.
If you could invite 3 people for dinner, who would they be?
Interesting. Right now, Ray Dalio would be interesting.
Oh.
So I've read his book or most of his book, Principles. I find he's very interesting to listen to. And you and I have spoken about this too, but I love that his analogy back to nature and understanding how nature works to understand just how life works.
Yeah.
And I love his analogies around that, but also he's an amazing mind around the economy and what's happening and stuff like that. So I think right at this particular point, he'd be great to have.
His radical transparency.
The radical transparency piece is
amazing.
Really interesting as well. So he'd definitely be one. I think Tom Brady would be interesting.
Oh, yes.
Just his...
So for those who don't know NFL, he's one of the best quarterbacks in history.
He's probably the greatest of all time.
Of all time.
I think it's 7 championships now.
Still playing at 40 years old.
Still playing at his age. It'd just be great to have a conversation with him on how he's
mind.
Like, and from all accounts, he's an amazing leader. And he obviously went to the Buccaneers and won there. But I think they came from nowhere. But I think a lot of it was down to his on-field leadership as well. So he'd be interesting. Maybe if I say and their wives, so just to bring some diversity into this, because I'm not.
Well, your wife is an automatic invite,
and my wife, an automatic invite, and a third. Interesting. Interesting one. I don't know. I'm going to go with Roger Federer just because I'm a big fan of his too.
Yeah. I have a slightly small obsession with Roger. Just his character, the way he manages his family and his business, and the way he goes about it, his application.
Cool, calm, collected character.
This is what he doesn't do anything that's extravagant, but yet has people eating out the palm of his hand. And that's kind of the bit to me which really showcases his behavioural and behavioural characteristics.
He does it with grace, but I think if you watched him, do you remember him early days? He didn't carry himself very well as a junior.
But does anyone?
I guess that's right. I guess.
So you can see the learning that he's gone through.
But you can see that, you can see the journey that he's gone through, and I guess what he's become, and he's
on the cricket field, I was the dumb fast bowler that went back to his down at fine leg and kicked the water bottle and swore like no tomorrow. But you learn as you grow older, and that type of behaviour doesn't really get you far.
No.
What's some of the best advice that you've ever received?
That's an interesting one, actually. The first thing that popped up in my head was something that I guess Mark Menther had said to me. Like I said, he was a mentor of mine. Was just in terms of, I guess, on the wellbeing piece, and that's probably where I learned a lot of it from as well, working for him. But he used to talk about the importance of the mind, body, and the soul. So. And making sure that you're balancing all those 3 things at any one time. So probably pretty good advice. Like I said, that was the first thing that popped up in my head. So
that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be quick fire for that reason. So brilliant. If you had access to a time machine, where would you go?
That's a tricky question because I think it'd be fascinating to go back to a lot of different eras.
Or forward, right?
Or forward.
It's your choice.
Yeah. I think I'd still go back just to, maybe not. But I think, again, I think I guess back to sort of the early settlers sort of time, and when things were getting set up. I just think that would have been a really interesting time to be around.
I'd like to. I've always promoted that I would go forward. Right,
Yeah.
I'm optimist, futurist, all the above sci-fi geek. So I kind of really want to see where we end up, and if we end up all in being robots with our brains downloaded into this computer.
Yeah,
but
I reckon last time someone asked me that question, I did say go forward, and the reason I said go forward was so I could make sure I was educating my kids to the best of the ability, knowing what was coming in the future.
Absolutely. So, just give them a couple of the key stocks, couple
of key tips
where to invest.
Yeah.
But the idea of going back and we're really sort of experiencing the way people lived without electricity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Without,
all the basics.
And how they manage it. Like, what goes through my head? I wish to an element that I lived through that time, because at a time where books were prevalent too, because you could just read so much more.
Right.
Because think about how much.
What else we do?
Or how much we get distracted today.
Exactly.
And it'd be an interesting time to go back to. If you had one superhero power, what would it be?
I think everyone probably says to fly.
Yeah, they do.
It's
typical and boring.
And boring. I think being invisible would be pretty cool too.
Yeah, quite. Yeah,
you could literally
quite invasive. I think
you could be that literally that fly on the wall. So that'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah, invisibility would be good. There's an element of me that isn't so comfortable with that though.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, exactly. I think I'll go with the first one, flying.
Fly. Brilliant. Now, you have listened to some podcasts, so you know that hopefully you know this question was coming up, and I didn't prepare for you, but you are a father of 3.
Yeah.
You've surely got a really good dad joke in the back pocket.
A good dad joke. Oh God. Haven't used one for a while.
Far away. I need one.
A good dad joke. See, my kids aren't at that age yet where there's a good dad joke.
How old are they?
7, 5, and 2.
Oh, the 7-year-old's prime for good dad jokes right now.
Yeah.
I've been rattling them off since they were bloody born.
Well, what's your favourite one?
No, don't deflect this onto me.
It'll give me some time to think. So you give me one.
I've said so many. I don't want to use the same ones. The old. If you what? If you what color? No, hang on, I've lost it. Yeah, we've got to edit this. I'm normally proud.
Okay, I've got one. What's your name?
Daniel.
What am I touching?
Your nose.
What am I holding?
Nothing.
Daniel knows nothing.
See what you did.
My kids do love that one.
Well done. Very good. Thank you very much. I can't believe I stalled on a dad joke. I'm going to... You put me on the spot there. Now I know what it feels like. So thank you very much for your time today, Brendan. It's been an amazing chat. First and foremost, thank you for everything that you are doing in your role as a leader, and you're obviously leading exceptionally well and getting results and fantastic results, with the simple fact that you're putting a lot of emphasis on the well-being. So thank you for everything you're doing there, and just with the community stuff. I mean, the amount of time and effort that must go into it and take you away from your family, from your work, from all the above. South Australia and Australia obviously is benefiting from that ball in itself and all the good that you're doing from it.
I think when you do something passionate, it finds its own energy and space, doesn't it? But no, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to be on. It's been great to get to know you through this journey, and thanks for everything you're doing for the community as well in terms of what you do with your business. And this podcast is obviously giving people a platform to hear from some of the great work that people locally are doing. So it's great. So
thank you. Hugs all around. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you next time. Take care.